Hello all. I've been a long-time reader of this site and others like it since I recently found out about a betrayal by my wife. Guess I thought it was time to share a bit of my story and seek some advice. My only concern is that some of the specifics would cause us to be identified fairly easily. Does anyone have any suggestions on how to prevent that? Thank you for the reply. I suppose it's fairly obvious, but it's some of the nuances of this situation that I'm really questioning in my head, and I really need some advice on. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to describe this to you all to get the best advice. I appreciate the reply. Fair enough, thank you. I'll share more tomorrow as I'm exhausted and going to bed. I'll probably lie there awake for most of it thinking about where this all went wrong. It feels like a nightmare that I want to wake up from, but unfortunately, it's my new reality. Okay, since I can't sleep, I thought it was time to share a bit more. Here it goes. I'm not sure where to start, but I'll try to give enough information to help. I apologize if it's too long. My wife and I are in our 40s. We've been together for about 25 years and married for 19 of those years. We met through mutual friends and got along great. We just had a good time together, and it felt right. Before we officially started seeing each other, my wife was seeing a good friend of mine. Even though we were all young at the time, John was known as a bit of a player and used to have a different girlfriend every week. He was my best friend, and I have known him since we were about 8 years old. We literally grew up together and later enjoyed going to sports events and having beers together. I was even his best man at his wedding. When he moved on to someone else, sometime later, I started a relationship with my now wife, and we've been together ever since. My wife and I have fairly high moral standards and decided to wait until we were married before we had sex, so we were each other's first in that respect and in many other respects. When we first got married, we were both struggling financially with poorly paid jobs, but we didn't care. We just wanted to be together and decided to get married and trust that things would work out. Fast forward a few years, I climbed the corporate ladder, and my wife also decided to retrain and got a good job working for herself, earning good money. So now we are comfortable in terms of money and have no worries there. We also had our 2 children during this time, and everything was going really well. I was working long hours, but the pay was good, and I was happy to provide for my little family. The only downside was that I didn't get to see them as much as I would have liked. My wife started working fewer hours as she was raising our children, but it didn't matter much, and it seemed like the best approach for our family. We've always gotten along well with John and his wife and their 2 children. In fact, our kids used to play together, and we would often go out as families for meals, holidays, etc. However, John and his wife were struggling in their marriage, and his wife eventually decided she had enough, and they divorced in 2019. John seemed upset, but he never tried to persuade me to take his side or anything like that. Tried to persuade his wife to stop the divorce. In fact, his view was that it was time to move on. Obviously, I cared about my friend's well-being, and he spent a fair amount of time at my house. We supported him through a very messy divorce. During the same time, my wife and I were still happy, although we were spending less and less time together. By the end of 2019 and into 2020, we would simply eat together, then watch TV in separate rooms, and then go to bed. Not ideal, but I figured that was normal for a couple married for almost 20 years. Life in Essex was okay. Nothing great, but okay. Again, 19 years later, we weren't exactly going at it like newlyweds anymore, right? I also started noticing that she was on her phone all the time. And I mean all the time. But she's big into social media. And it's not like I was sitting next to her anyway, so it didn't bother me too much. What did start to bother me was the way she was always using her phone at an angle and taking it everywhere with her. One evening, though, she came home and for some reason left her phone unlocked on the dining room table. So I took a peek. What I saw in her messages nearly floored me, and I mean that genuinely. I started shaking and nearly keeled over. But I grabbed my own phone and took some pictures so I could read the messages properly later. They were messages from John, but the ones that floored me were from some other guy. Let's call him John too. She had been texting this guy and ending the texts with hun and 30, etc. It also appeared to me that he was supporting her emotionally in some way, calling her beautiful and trying to arrange to meet her. Her texts back to him were clearly friendly and overfamiliar, but she was making excuses not to meet him, but promised to call him. I think he had bought her a present and wanted to give it to her, but she was making excuses not to meet him. However, it was enough for me that night to basically accuse her of having an affair with John too. The really odd thing was when I made the accusation to her, she assumed I was talking about John 1, not John 2. She denied anything inappropriate, and when I demanded she show me her phone, the messages had been deleted. Of course, when I showed her the pictures I had, she then backtracked slightly, but explained that he had been bothering her and she was trying to nicely get rid of him. She said they had met during her weekly exercise and had started talking and exercising together, but nothing had happened. She also said she was fed up with his attention now and was trying to make excuses not to talk to him anymore. She even changed the park where she exercised. They had never met outside of that. I asked what he was trying to give her, and she said some flowers to cheer her up. But she said she didn't want them. I should also mention here that I think my wife is very body conscious and has never been happy in a bikini, etc. Even though I've always thought she looks great, she has always been fairly insecure. Therefore, the thought that she could have been intimate with anyone else was a million miles away in my mind. I was more concerned with the emotional aspect. And she may have been naive with her interactions with another guy and sent out some wrong signals. I told her I wasn't happy with the texts she was sending and that she should not be sending anything like that to another man. Even if she was trying to nicely get rid of someone, she should be careful of the signals she sends out. Then I went to sleep and didn't think too much more about it. I think that will do for now. I will continue later. Reader comment. Based on your initial story, it seems like your wayward wife is having an affair. My wife is having an emotional affair with a friend, John, who just got divorced from his ex, who is also our friend. Have you discussed the evidence you gathered with your unfaithful wife? Was it just an emotional affair? Was it ever physical? When did the affair start? Did your unfaithful wife admit to having an affair? All the best, original poster. Thank you for the reply. I will get there, I promise. But it's such a messed up situation that you couldn't make it up. After the initial shock, I started thinking more about things and questioning what my wife was telling me. Our relationship was also deteriorating. There was no arguing or anything like that, but I could sense a coldness and distance from her that was not a good place to be. I ended up drinking more and trying to drown out my feelings. But we had so many years together, nothing was going wrong. I decided to check her honesty and placed a tracker in her car to verify if she was telling the truth. So I sat back and watched. After a couple of weeks, I noticed a strange pattern in her movements. She would go where she said she was going, but then she would go and sit in random locations before coming home. I would also text her to ask where she was, and she would say one location, but she was clearly somewhere else. Not for long, but enough for me to wonder why she was lying to me. Then, on one occasion, she said she was going shopping, but her car was parked in a side road. When she got home with some clothes, I asked her about her day, and everything seemed normal. The next day, I did something that I now regret. I told her we needed to talk. We went out, and I asked her to tell me about her day yesterday. She recalled everything she had been doing, and I basically said, I know you're lying to me. Your car wasn't where you said it was. How would you know that? Eventually, I lost my temper and told her that I had placed a tracker on her car and that I knew she had been lying to me. She responded with, You're wrong. Stop controlling me. I knew you would do something like that, so I decided to test you. My friend picked me up, and we went shopping together. I did what I said I would do. You clearly don't trust me, and I think we should separate. I was shocked and asked her to slow down and talk to me. She then proceeded to give me the whole I love you, but I'm not in love with you speech. She had been deeply unhappy for years, and if it weren't for COVID, she would have left. I was completely blindsided and started scrambling to save our marriage. I should also mention that the tracker battery died at this point, and she started hiding her car key from me because she was worried. I got another tracker, but she couldn't stand being watched. At the same time, I started looking for ways to save our marriage and read forums on Tam. I read various stories from others and started thinking, wait a minute. This happened, that happened. Surely she's not having an affair. Not my wife. I must be wrong. But the more I looked, the more I started to believe that it was happening, and somehow I had missed it. I also got annoyed at myself for admitting that I had placed a tracker on her car. Some of the advice on there focused on changing yourself, so I started to get fit, be more active, and drink less. I also asked for more time, and we could work through our issues and not give up without trying. Without giving it a chance, she agreed. But I found out she was miles ahead of me. She had talked to her parents about how unhappy she was, talked to a lawyer, etc. I was feeling totally defeated and just could not believe what I was hearing. But I thought, I will continue with my self-improvements anyway. I was feeling loads better in myself, and I honestly thought at this point she was going, so I needed to prepare. I also spoke to a lawyer about my options. So one of the things I assumed was if anyone, it would be John too. So I spoke to my good mate, John 1, and asked for his advice. What he said made me wince. He just said, speaking from his own experience, if it's time to go, just go. Start again. Don't bother trying to fix something if she wants out. Let her. That's what I did, and I'm loads happier. Everyone else I shared my issues with gave great advice on how to save the marriage. I just thought to myself, well, he is the only person I talked to who has been divorced himself, so I suppose he has a different perspective. A couple of months went by. I'm working from home now due to the pandemic, spending more time with family, and trying to be a good dad. We're doing loads of stuff together as a family, and eventually my wife said, you know what, the new you are great. I want to work on us. This was slightly out of the blue, but also great news to me, as I couldn't bear the thought of splitting my family up. I loved her and my kids. I did remember, though, that I had to watch her actions. And this is where I started thinking, what's going on here? Nothing is changing. She's still cold and indifferent, even though she says she wants to work on us. It was like she was stalling and waiting for something else. I then decided I was a poor pie, so I hired one. He was great, with good suggestions. He said, do I really want to know? But I said, the not knowing was worse. He started on a plan to follow my wife discreetly and report back. So after a couple of operations and nothing, I was thinking, okay, that's good. Then eventually one weekend morning, he was watching her and she met John 1 at a fairly secluded location. He said he couldn't get close, but all they did was talk and walk. Now, keep in mind, we were in lockdown, so this should not have happened. Learning from before, I decided not to confront too early and suggested to my pie to keep going. I did wonder if the meeting had been accidental, but he said no, it was a definite meet at a specific time and place. At this point, my mind was all over the place. I did check in with my wife to randomly ask her when she last saw John 1, and she said, oh, weeks ago. So I knew she was not telling me the truth about him. A couple of weeks went by, and they met a few more times. One incident involved her getting into John 1's car and them driving to a secluded car park. My pie followed and said they were talking and arguing and nothing physical happened, as they didn't have enough time. His view was that it looked like she was trying to get away from him. He certainly couldn't say for certain if they were having an affair. But of course he did say the obvious. Why doesn't she pick up the phone if she wants to talk? Maybe they had something at some point, and she's trying to break it off. So I am now convinced, if anyone, it's gotta be him. I decided I had seen enough and I will confront. To be honest, my health was good, but my sleeping at this point was shocking. I had moved from being desperate to save the marriage to wondering, who is this person I am living with? Maybe it is time to move on. I can't trust her anymore. So divorce day Y1 approaches, and I start with the whole, when did you last see John 1? I gave the response weeks ago, etc. Then I said, okay, I know you're lying. Only the truth from now on, or I will divorce you myself. She's slightly nervous now, starting to moan about a few things and asking why I want to know. It's not your concern who I speak to. I am allowed to have friends, etc. She is still denying everything. I present some evidence that I know they have met. Then she confessed, okay, yes, I met him once. Then I said, you've met him more than once, and I know what you've been up to. Silent. Then she said he's been helping me. He's been setting me up so I could divorce you. I didn't know who else to ask for help. I've met him a couple of times to sort out how I could manage on my own. No, I don't want to be with him. He is helping me as a friend, that's all. She also shared some things with me that I can't write here that made me believe her. She then said, that was then. It's different now. I want to be here with you. I know he wanted to be with me, but I never wanted to be with him. I just used the fact that he wanted to be with me, so he would help me out with practical arrangements if I left you. I led him to believe that they had a future together if he helped me out. I must admit, at this point I was like, sorry, but men don't do anything like this for free. What has been going on, really? You must have done something. She then said, you know how I am about my body. You are the only one who has seen me, I promise you. She was adamant that nothing physical other than holding hands had happened. She then said, I totally changed my mind. Recently it's been great, and I want to stay. Let's work on us and really make a go of it. I totally regret lying to you about meeting him. The next couple of weeks were amazing. She couldn't do enough for me. It felt like we were newlyweds, etc. There is more to come. Read her comment. Sounds like your wife's AP doesn't want her full-time, and she doesn't want to be alone. So you're her plan B and she's sticking around. For now. Original poster, I have to say that is one POV I hadn't considered. The alone bit, you are spot on. But it may help if I continue the story, and this is where you will all probably say, WTF, move on already. And I kinda get that. Here goes. So, great, couple of weeks, we're back to better than normal? All good. Or so I think. Completely out of the blue, I am contacted by John 1's ex-wife. She sends an extremely blunt, to-the-point text to me saying, John 1 and your wife have been having an affair since 2017. You should get tested for STDs, etc. As he was not the first affair your wife has had. So I'm like, WTF is going on now? I ring her up and she tells me, John 1 has grown a conscience and admitted to her that he had an affair with my wife while they were married, prior to their divorce. He also stated some details of how it started. He claims my wife was having an affair with John too, that she thought she had caught an STD and panicked. She couldn't talk to me about it, so she decides to go to John 1 for help. Like Akisa, he comes to her aid and sees her into the clinic and helps her out. They then unbelievably start their own affair. This goes on for the best part of 3 years. Yep, 3 effing years. Right under my nose. I had no clue this was even happening until I started looking after the messages I saw on her phone and got suspicious. But even then, 3 years. So again, my world ends. I have no reason not to believe what I am hearing. Why would she lie? Why would she lie? We're all on divorce day too. Kids are out. So I confront my wife about this new information. It takes about 5 hours total, but she eventually admits to sleeping with John 1 and John 2. She says it started with John 2, then she confided in John 1 about her concerns regarding STDs. He took advantage and basically threatened to tell me if she didn't continue with him. She was, I quote, his slave. Now I was in complete shock. The perfect moral wife with body issues was sitting there sobbing her heart out. I basically said to her, we're done. I cannot believe anything you say anymore. Get your lawyer ready. After much pleading from her, I said, maybe we could see if we can move past it. It was way too early to make that decision, but I know now. Obviously, she's over the moon and says she'll do anything I want to make it right. Still in complete shock, she then went to see her mom and dad and confessed everything to them. I sat there saying I would try and work it out with their daughter. She also told a number of family and friends what a fool she had been. She seems to be showing full remorse and is trying to work hard on us. Part of the issue for me was the utter anger I had for John 1. I had known him as a friend for 30 years. How could he do this to me? Oddly, I was looking past my wife at this time. All I felt was total sadness and pity for her, not anger. I felt she was a victim. Now, as time has moved on, I'm now in... Hold on, she made the commitment to me, not him. I married her, not him, so my anger towards her is building at a very quick rate. Also, the slave image and what that would entail is just awful to contemplate. I am also struggling with the plan B bit. She says after John 2, she knew she had destroyed our marriage, therefore she never saw me as an option. She couldn't come clean, and tried to make a go of it with John 1. Then she decided she wanted out, and that's why he basically threw her under the bus as she wasn't cooperating anymore. That's what the PI saw them doing, arguing together with him, threatening to spill all if she left. Part of me thinks he just grew bored of her, moved on, and thought, may as well destroy their lives while I'm here. Great friend, eh? The weeks pass and we're struggling with some kind of half-assed reconciliation. I'm swinging daily between honoring her and booting her out. She is trying and answering all the questions I have, even though she basically doesn't want to talk about it if she can avoid it. A massive issue here are our children, who don't really know the whole story and would be devastated by divorce. There's also the fear of having to start again, etc., etc. I've spent my whole adult life with this woman and feel I should try and give it a go before I pull the trigger and divorce. Am I being a complete and utter fool here? It's one thing to think about what you will do in this situation, but another to actually be here. It's all just so messed up. Oh, and one other thing, the possum John tried to contact my wife. She shared with me his note, basically asking if they could see each other and work it out, like what the actual falls. She showed me, and it proved to me she hasn't been in contact with him before the note. It was something I insisted on, and she has given me complete openness with her phone, etc. Am I being a complete idiot to even consider this and somehow be able to move on? I obviously don't trust her in the same way I did before, and I'm also wondering if I should ask the PI to get back on it, just in case. I've said I can't and won't do this again. It's been unbelievably hard already. Sorry for the long post. Not 100% sure yet how to respond to specific posts, but to answer, I'm surprised you didn't realize early on that John 1 was not your friend, and you asked him for advice. So it became clear to me later on what an absolute fraud this friend of mine actually is. When I talked to him, I did so thinking, I am fairly sure it's you, but I wanted to hear what he had to say, especially about the John 2 text. Of course, at that time I didn't have the full picture, but it started to not trust him, and then what he said confirmed for me it was very likely him. I actually thought it may be a surprise for him to know she had been texting someone else, but he obviously already knew that. I just couldn't prove anything and didn't want to confront without evidence. Thanks all so far. It's really difficult to read some of these comments, but I know deep down it's the truth. It's different when you know the person they concern, rather than reading a stranger's post. This is my life. I have huge concerns she will repeat. The absolutely scary thing is how easily she lied for so long. And I didn't have a clue. The levels of deceit are incredible. I'm amazed she could pull it off. In terms of the why she did it, I keep trying to get her to open up, especially about the first guy. I get the distinct impression it was 100% his words, and he played on the lonely housewife bit, need to have some fun, etc., etc. Now, interestingly, his wife has no clue this has happened. He isn't the type of job where this could happen regularly. If I tell her, it will cause huge issues, obviously blow up their worlds, but also to our finances, as I am fairly sure my wife would be unlikely to work again. I know I should, but it would be crushing in any divorce if she couldn't work anymore. She says I know it all now. There's nothing else to say. She carried on with John when under duress, so tried to make a go of it. She slips a few comments out every now and again, though, which make me think doesn't sound like duress to me. I also think I am definitely her plan B. I'm not feeling loved in the way I used to, and I know she's capable of this. I've been with her long enough to know the difference. It's like I'm a chore to keep happy. I've asked her where her head's at, and she keeps saying, give it time. But if I'm honest, I feel like the last 3 years have been wasted, and I keep feeling if I'm going to restart, the sooner the better. But it's a massive step, and if I do decide to go, then I think I need to be 100% committed to that direction. What a mess. So I'm trying to reply to these posts, but struggling, if I'm honest, with how to get specific parts. Anyway, this is exactly how she says she felt. The thing is, though, did confess, that's not how I felt at all. It took him a long time to trust that I really wanted to wreck Inc., since you two were each other's first and had saved yourselves for marriage. I'm sure she felt tainted and like you'd never want her back once you knew. Also, just to say, she has agreed to have NC with any of the APs. Of course, now John 1 is public enemy number 1 and she says she can't stand him. She's desperate. I don't speak to him, mind you. Not sure what to do there, if I'm honest. My own therapist suggested I do not, as how could I trust anything he said anyway? Seemed fair enough. She has agreed to do counseling, if that's what I want her to do. However, I want her to go to counseling on her own steam. She has given me all passwords and passcodes for social media, phone, etc., etc. Read her comment. She doesn't want you to speak to him. I wonder what he may be hiding that she doesn't want you to know. Original poster, yes. Exactly what I have been wondering as well. I'm gonna take a break and do some work. Really appreciate all the comments so far. I've never been in such a difficult position in my lifetime. There's so much more to this that I have posted thus far. Even the long posts don't quite communicate it properly. But I've already been given lots to think about. Thanks. So that's one of the things that's annoyed me the most. John 1, his marriage was failing. It was only a matter of time. John 2, well, he was separated. And then, like, what the heck about our marriage then? Sheesh. Okay, it gets a complete mess quickly, doesn't it? John 2 was first. He is a tradesman for the purposes of this forum, a plumber. He did a job in our house and, as you can tell, overstayed his welcome and continued his services for 5 months. John 1 is the friend who she confided in. Their affair started soon after the test. Clear, by the way. Then continued. My wayward wife has absolutely confirmed she was entertaining all 3 of us at once at one point. Yes, incredible, right? I should say John 1 and John 2 knew about each other. But she eventually broke off with John 2 as John 1 is the jealous type. You couldn't make this up, could you? As for John 1's wife, she wanted to apologize, but the other betrayed spouse wants nothing to do with my wayward wife ever again. Oh, and Normie, which I felt a bit harsh. But up to her. Thanks all for the replies and suggestions. I was fully expecting the rude comments, as quite frankly, I'm still utterly horrified by this whole thing and still trying to wrap my head around what just happened. I completely agree. I offered reconciliation way too early. One of my many regrets in this situation. I will try to answer some questions as best I can, but I know I am not being told the whole truth and doubt I ever will be. Hindsight is a wonderful thing, and just keep in mind I was learning about all of this as I went through a period of approximately 7 months. This didn't all just come out. Some things were shared on DD2 that didn't have to be. I wouldn't have been any the wiser. And also, as time has gone on and my wayward wife answered my cues, more started to come out. I have tried to explain it here, but it's not easy, so some details that explain certain parts I cannot share. Okay, John 1. Me and my wayward wife have basically grown up together in the same friendship group. He was dating my wife, but for a short time as teenagers, before we then all started to grow up, get into serious relationships and marry, etc. We all remained friends as explained. It's absolutely possible that John 1 could have been having an affair with my wife for a long time and throughout the marriage. It's possible. For me, though, a change occurred in 2017. My wayward wife became, as others have described, a different person. This was also obvious to me in some areas, but also difficult to explain. She was just different, more outgoing but less affectionate with me, etc. I am also having a hard time accepting the STD testing story, other than the fact that I have texts from her in 2017 that confirm her basically saying things are not quite right down below and she wanted to get checked out. Now, why didn't that ring alarm bells for me? Well, let's just say, also at the same time I bought some accessories. Some accessories were bought to spice things up, as our sex life had dipped and she blamed them. Why didn't she reach out to someone other than J1? There are 2 main reasons, I believe. My wife values her reputation greatly, and I suspect she was having at least an emotional affair with J1 at that time. She told me she sent him a message admitting she had made a huge mistake and asked for his help. As you now know, he helped, so why didn't she just handle it on her own? This didn't make sense to me either, and it made me wonder if there was something else going on, like a pregnancy termination. I was away for nights during that time, so she could have had something scheduled and needed someone to drive her. To address another question, the OBS of J1 had suspicions, but could never prove anything. She included these in her divorce papers, along with other evidence. One of the reasons she was so upset was because she didn't talk to me about her suspicions back then. She only found out the truth when J1 confessed. As for OBS2 with J2, she has no knowledge of this affair. I have never met J2 since finding out about him. The thought of telling OBS2 is something I am struggling with, as mentioned earlier. It would definitely harm my wife's earning potential, which is selfish on my part, I know. But talking to her about it would be the right thing to do. J1 is currently out of the picture and blocked on all of our social media accounts. I have considered talking to him and getting his side of the story, which I know will differ from my wife's, as we have a mutual friend who told me what he had said. Obviously, the whole duress thing is missing completely, and they fell in love. They knew it was wrong, but they believed it was meant to be. From the note he sent my wife after everything came out, he confirms the timeline that I am aware of. He also confirms that they were making plans for a future together and legitimizing their relationship. After my wife divorced me, I have always wondered why she didn't just divorce me before all of this came out. It's something I keep asking her. So it's possible that she is trying to minimize the fallout and damage to her reputation by staying with me. Currently, only our immediate families and close friends know about this affair. I also believe she wanted to separate first and test out real-world living with her affair partner before getting a divorce. But she never had the chance to. Anyway, back to bed. I read her comment and am responding to yours. I am also struggling to believe her story about getting tested for STDs, especially since I have texts from her in 2017 where she mentions that things are not quite right down there and she wanted to get checked out. So why didn't that raise any red flags for me? It seems like she hasn't completely hidden this from me. In this case, her excuses become even weaker. A person of average intelligence would not panic so much before anything became clear. She could have gone to the clinic on her own, gotten tested, and if the result was negative, she could have just continued as if nothing had happened. So, why didn't she just handle it on her own? I have no idea. This didn't make sense to me either. And it made me wonder if there was something else going on, like a pregnancy termination. Remember, logic is not a difficult concept. If something seems ridiculous, it probably is. If it doesn't seem believable, it's probably a lie. Her explanations just don't add up. If she had been more logical, you wouldn't be questioning her story. Explanation. It could be a logical lie, of course, just because it made sense doesn't always mean it was true, but at least it wouldn't make nonsense. So, your suspicion about the removal of the child seems much more plausible. Even then, it makes sense for her to go with someone. But why with John? That question is still unanswered. Do you have the documents of the STD test she had? If there isn't one, and she can't show it, you should ask her which clinic it is, and research whether she has had such a procedure. Original poster? Okay, you are spot on here. I have no idea why I didn't see this before. Her explanation has to be complete BS, because she told me she was going. Yes, this is why a new look. View of this is so useful. However, in terms of verifying anything, I don't see how that is possible with patient confidentiality, etc. Of course, John will know the truth. Thanks again for suggestions. I've started looking into polygraph testing in my area. I will also ask for the timeline. It's one of the things I said I would insist on, but didn't follow up, so that's on me. The records would be interesting, but I just looked online to see if the removal of the child or STD testing would be included. And it basically said you could opt out if you wanted to. So I'm guessing that could be used as an excuse, and/or they may not show anything at all. I don't know, I can also ask, right? I suppose the bigger question is, for F's sake, haven't I had enough already to just move on? Yes, that would be the answer to that. But for some reason, I'm yearning for the truth and hanging on. I have no idea why, really. Oh, and this reader comment. Lastly, the response "give it time" is not the response of a remorseful wayward wife who is all in to rebuild her destroyed marriage. I still suggest you begin to move on until she not only changes her tune and attitude, but actually begins and completes the work a wayward must do in order to save their relationship.